Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this space. Thank you for playing that, Joy. That was such a wonderful way to walk into a space and just know that we're surrounded by love and just really ready to start this wonderful learning session with you all. That song was played, that's playing is called Don't Give Up by Catherine Paul, who also is performing as Black Belt Eagle Scout. Catherine is Swinomish and Inupiaq. So again, just welcome to the space that we're in. As you're entering the space, please put your name, your pronouns, and organization in the chat box. So we're going to also start with the land acknowledgement. We always like to do that at the North Sound ACH to honor the ancestral lands that we sit on. So we begin by acknowledging with humility that the land where we are today is the territory of the people of the Salish Sea. Their presence is imbued in the waterways, shorelines, valleys, and mountains of the traditional homelands of the Coast Salish people since time immemorial. Again, if you've never visited the website, we have provided that to learn more about the Indigenous land where you are, where you live, work, and play. So that's important. Please visit if you have that calling to do so. We also have group working agreements. We also want to highlight that we're going to spread kindness, but because we don't know what others are carrying. So take care of yourselves and then also carry that to your teams that you work with in your families. Learn to disagree without breaking. Bridging is critical to creating spaces where people feel they belong. So while we may not always agree, we can always find ways to not other or break. Allow for being uncomfortable as part of growth. We strive here for spaces that have support being brave, where we can learn from and grow with each other. Be curious and ask questions. Ask questions from a place of true curiosity so that we're open to those moments of, oh, I hadn't thought of that way before. I love those moments. Create opportunities for follow-up. Recognize that we'll all try, but we will not resolve everything in real time, but we will keep track of items that will need follow-up. Share from our own experiences. Speak from what you have experienced. Speak from I, not they. Use language that is respectful, accessible, and inclusive. The words that we do use matter. They elicit metaphors and narratives that show space for belonging or create exclusions. Also, last but not least, respect the privacy and confidentiality of what is shared. What is shared here is not yours to share elsewhere without permission, and encourage self-care to step away when needed. So that's very important. Next slide. Also, some quick tech tips. Take a look at the Zoom control bar at the bottom of your screen. You will notice the question and answer function, the raise hand function, the interpretation button there at the very bottom. Let me see, sorry, excuse me. I also wanted to highlight some of the Zoom options you'll find needing assistance. You will see the tool emoji. That's the little tool that has our that can allow participants to easily connect with Natalie. She's our super user behind the screen. So if you see her, you'll be able to see Natalie, and she has a little tool emoji by her name. Also, if you can, a few housekeeping tips. Use the chat throughout as it is being monitored for your questions. Also, if you could have, and it feels safe for you, please have your camera on if you are available, if you're able to. And also, this meeting is being recorded. And so our time together is going to be great. We have a little bit of, I believe, our change, maybe it's reflecting here on the charts. So we're going to have some grounding time. We're going to flip our videos. I believe the first video is going to be the Children of the Setting Sun productions with Stillaguamish Fisheries and Our Health. Then we're going to go into our panel discussion with our wonderful panel by the name of Cindy Curtis Myatt from North Cascades Wild Church, Oak Rankin from Glacier Peak Institute, Denice Rochelle from the Bronze Chapter. Then we're going to, again, flip the video, and it's going to be the Soxhawtl, the Big Walk. We're going to have some small group breakout reflection and then closing. And at this time, I would love to be able to pass the mic over to my wonderful colleague, Keiko McCracken.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Keiko. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the innovation specialist here at North Sound ACH. And thank you so much, Vanessa, for welcoming us into this wonderful learning space. These learning sessions are centered on wisdom sharing, on creating new possibilities, and for just and equitable outcomes for our communities. And this purpose is really at the heart of North Sound's Collaborative Action Network, which is to increase belonging and well-being through interwoven frameworks that guide our actions, including tribal sovereignty, targeted universalism, leading with love, and the 7 vital conditions. And of those 7 vital conditions, one is especially pertinent to our conversation today, and that is a thriving natural world. And so together, we're going to explore what the outdoors means for different communities and how intersectionality can impact access to and the experience of nature. And, given the climate crisis, given everything that's happening in the world today, this is not necessarily a light topic. And though some of our focus is definitely going to be on truth telling, we're going to focus equally on hope and healing, and to help us center into that space where we can balance these historical and present day truths with the wisdom of hope. I wanted to start with this fragment of a well-known Mary Oliver poem. Many of you will recognize it. This is from Wild Geese. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Next slide, please. So we begin, as we must always in any conversation, with not only who we are, but who we were and how we got to this moment. And I think when we're talking about nature and the outdoors, it's so important to start with history and to think about our concepts, our national concepts of the outdoors, of nature and access to the outdoors. And, recognizing that we have the privilege of living in an exceedingly beautiful region. It is part of the American West. It's a geographic territory that's deeply embedded in the American psyche as a place of possibility and becoming. And much of who we are as Americans, our national identity, our national narrative, is premised on this idea or mythos of the land as virgin territory, whose purpose was fulfilled by waves of settlers. And other terms for this are Western expansion or manifest destiny. And you can hear in these terms a kind of inexorability, a God-given justification. And one should not underestimate how much these concepts of wilderness, unconscious or conscious, have shaped our relationship to the outdoors and our sense of being in the world. And so as we begin this discussion of health in the outdoors, we want to acknowledge how history is always in the room and how culture has shaped access to nature and for whom. Wilderness historian Roderick Nash tells us that wilderness is a matter of perception. It's a geography of the mind, so to speak. And in this slide, you'll see a particular painting by Albert Bierstadt, who is a well-known 19th century painter of the American West, and whose work was, in fact, very important to shaping national ideas about the West for the general public at that time. And if you look at this painting, you see the scene is very majestic, it's transcendent. It is, in fact, it inspires the same feelings as one might feel in the great cathedrals of Europe, because in fact, as Americans, nature is our cathedral. And so this is a very intentional elevation of those feelings in as the public pondered what it meant to inhabit these spaces. And the other thing you see is that this is a landscape that is devoid of human presence. And that is very important because that, in fact, is how the West was sold. And so in American culture, our traditional concept of the outdoors and of wilderness is dependent on this condition of purity. In our mythos, the wilderness is not, nor has it ever been, inhabited. And of course, we know that that statement is fundamentally untrue because indigenous peoples have inhabited these regions since time immemorial. But we needed that statement to be true to justify nation building in the same way that there are narratives or were narratives about the necessity, quote unquote, of slavery at that same moment. And so this mythos of this removal of this nation building in the 19th century, the removal of indigenous tribes from the land through genocide, through the decimation of traditional food sources like the buffalo, that became an all-consuming focus of white settlement policies. And so the concept of the land, of the outdoors and wilderness itself became racialized, and it was meant for white settlers and for no one else. And in fact, a racialized wilderness is a cornerstone to the founding of the conservation movement itself in our country, and it's responsible for the creation of our national parks. John Muir, who is often considered the father of the conservation movement and the founder of the Sierra Club, was in fact an avowed racist. And his colleague and co-founder of the Sierra Club, David Starr Jordan, was a renowned eugenicist whose work and research, quote unquote, ideas were studied by Nazi Germany. And, in 2020, after George Floyd, the Sierra Club began to reckon with this legacy and confront it directly, as, they worked toward a more overtly inclusionary definition of who belongs in nature, who belongs in the outdoors. And so this historical truth that we begin with is that our national parks and our open spaces not only sprang from a history of ethnic cleansing, but they were originally meant solely as a refuge for white communities, and in particular, wealthy communities, a refuge from the hustle and bustle of urban life. And we can see how that internalized definition of the outdoors has continued to reverberate throughout our communities in terms of access and health outcomes, and not just for BIPOC communities, but for LGBTQ plus communities, for people with disabilities, both visible and invisible, and for rural communities who are farthest from resources. Next slide, please. And so what we see is that if you inhabit an identity that is outside of dominant cultural norms by race, religion, gender, sexuality, by economic class, or by state of physical or mental health, the outdoors can be a very different experience, and one that is fraught with considerations that are not encountered by those who fit a certain norm. According to the Black Washingtonians Work Group report on outdoor recreation, which was sponsored by the Washington State Parks Commission in 2022, fewer than 1.5% of visitors to Washington State parks are Black, despite representing more than 12% of the state's population. Ethnic populations account for only 5% of visits to national forests, yet 35% of the population living within 50 miles of national forests are ethnic minorities. And when we think about the barriers to access for those outside of the dominant culture, those can be intrapersonal, having to do with safety. And, there's so many memes about birding while Black, or camping while Black, or hiking while Black. And along with, insert any traditional identity within those memes, and the outcomes can be the same. Barriers can be interpersonal. They can be, well, who would I go with, which is also related to safety again. It just has to do with companionship in those spaces. They can be structural, the cost of equipping oneself for certain outdoor sports, the cost of transportation. And so, there are solid reasons why someone who is not part of the dominant culture, however we wish to define that, would not be in communion with natural spaces, with outdoor recreational activities, and even within their home environment, because ongoing studies now link the level of, say, tree canopy density in neighborhoods to a variety of negative health and social outcomes. There's a relationship between that percentage of tree canopy density and other measures of disinvestment in specific communities, along with an increase to climate vulnerability for those same communities. Next slide, please. And so in this example, this is from the tree equity score. This is of a specific neighborhood in Mount Vernon, which is here in the Skagit Valley. Its current canopy cover is just 8%, which is mapped, you'll see that below on the slide, to various other score indicators of vulnerability for that location. And what we also know, this is from a study recently published by Washington State University of adults 65 and over, having just 10% more forest space in a person's residential zip code is associated with reduced serious psychological distress. And similarly, a 10% increase in green space, tree cover, water bodies, or trail length lowered the chance that older people reported their general health as poor or only fair. Next slide, please. And so what we know is that the environment and our relationship to it shapes fundamental outcomes for our health and well-being. Many you may have heard of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. This is a field of neuroscience that focuses on how early life experiences shape later life health outcomes. It's a neurological adaptation to extreme or extended stress. We become highly activated, responding to all perceived threats with a rush of stress hormones that prepare us to survive, whether that's fight or flight or freeze or even fawn. And there's a wear and tear on the body from this constant state of activation. And why this matters is because exposure to early life stressors increases our vulnerability to negative environmental exposures. And so ACEs are correlated, as you can see from this quote above, with a lack of access to green spaces. In contrast, however, protective compensatory childhood experiences, or PACEs, experiencing nature, physical activity, mindfulness, supportive relationships, can help rewire and heal traumatized brains. And this is true not just for children, but for adults as well. Next slide, please. And I told you we would get to hope. Hope is coming in the work you're going to hear from our amazing panelists in the efforts being made in our region and elsewhere to create new definitions of belonging in nature, from play equity, which is the opportunity that everyone needs to participate in physical activities and nature-rich recreation, to the movement to green schoolyards for community access to become community schoolyards, to pediatricians who are writing nature prescriptions for their young patients and providing outdoor toys like chalk and bubble wands and seed packets, and even a bipartisan new law in Washington state that guarantees kindergarten through fifth grade students a minimum of 30 minutes of recess, preferably outdoors, and discourages the punitive practice of recess removal for academic or disciplinary reasons. Next slide, please. And so hope, as we know, is coming. It's already in the room. But before we dive into our live panel today, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge a vital aspect of our conversation that we regrettably could not offer today due to scheduling constraints, and that is the absence of an Indigenous voice in today's live dialogue. We fully understand the vital importance of this perspective, especially in discussions about our connection with the outdoors. And at North Sound ACH, we are deeply committed to uplifting Indigenous voices and to acknowledging their profound wisdom of the land and connections to the land. And given this, we want to uplift and incorporate Indigenous perspectives and voices from our region in ways that we can today. And so in today's session, we're going to be watching two videos that showcase the unique approaches of first the Stillaguamish and then the Sauk-Suwatl tribes in responding to community health needs through a holistic lens. And these videos were part of North Sound ACH's partnership with Children of the Setting Sun productions for their the 2022 film series, Tribal Approaches to Wellness. These are all available for you to view through our resource library, and includes videos for all 8 federally recognized tribes in the North Sound region. And each of these videos is a gift of wisdom to our community, and we're so grateful for their gracious sharing of that wisdom with us.
Salmon have always been a very important piece of our lives. They're in our creation stories, just like all the tribes here in Washington along the coast. They're key and central to our mental, physical, and spiritual health and well-being.
Without salmon, I don't know where we would be, and I don't think I want to.
I'm Sean Yanity, fisheries manager for the Stillaguamish tribe from Arlington, Washington. In 1980, I started working fisheries, and I worked for Department of Fisheries for 6 years, everything from a fish culturist, fish tagger, to maintenance, to security guard. Salmon has always been a key part of our traditional food, our health. They're in our songs, they're in our artwork, they're in our spiritual practices, and that goes right into our ceremonies. Our families fish together. It's a generational thing. Grandparents taking their grandchildren out onto the river, harvesting clams, going crabbing, going fishing. It's a fabric that's just woven into our identity, and we can't lose that.
My name is Katie B. Zaiva. I am a Stillaguamish tribal member. I also serve my tribe as a deputy fisheries manager and a councilwoman. I first started working for the tribe in 2011, and I started at behavioral health programs and realized how heavy that work was, and just knew it wasn't going to be sustainable for me or my spirit. Came over to natural resources as an admin assistant. That's when Sean started pulling me along to all these meetings, and seeing how dismal the returns were for salmon really sparked something in me, and I decided I needed to serve my tribe that way. And it was instant passion from the moment I stepped into the work. So many of our tribal members are struggling with chemical dependency issues, and I see a real strong connection with that and the fact that we don't have these salmon here to give people that purpose. I think because we don't have that right now, we're seeing a lot more of our tribal membership turn to drugs to kind of heal that trauma instead of turning to the traditions. I've never struggled with chemical dependency personally, but I have so many relatives who do, and this is my way to try and bring them some health, some wellness back.
Back in the day, we had salmon running almost all year round. You had spring and summer Chinook, you had fall, winter Chinook, summer, winter steelhead, and coho chum, pinks, but the Chinook has always been a key central part of our culture.
There is no subsistence fishing for us on Chinook. There is no commercial fishing for us on Chinook. And in my 30 years, it's just always been that way. So I'm really working hard to try and change that.
The harvest portion of it isn't the big impact compared to loss of habitat. There's only one way we can make a huge difference in the habitat issues is if we own the land. And so from the year 2000, we had 20 acres of land that was along the river. And so now we're close to 2,000 acres that is strictly for natural resource protection or treaty resources and salmon habitat. We got a couple spots over here that we tore dikes down on, created some meandering side channels in here. If we don't get our handle on habitat issues, we're going to have a struggle even maintaining our hatchery population. The impact of all the highways and the things that are being put into the soils and the damage that has been done, whether it's intentional or unintentional, has changed water temperatures, has changed the health of the environment. You know, we eat the salmon, which we already know in Puget Sound has high PCBs, metals, copper, you know, all these toxins, arsenic, all that stuff in our clams and our salmon. So when we eat that food, we're taking on them poisons as well. It does change the health of our community, the diabetes, heart disease. In the early 80s, Fish Committee back then, they decided to work on saving the Stillaguamish stock instead of just pumping out fish to catch. They went on the vision that we're gonna restore our run. We started with a very small operation. I think they had 2 bathtubs, and that's what we started raising our fish in. We're bathtubs, and through the years, we've been able to maintain the population and level it off so it hasn't gone extinct.
You know, we've got 900 some odd fish coming back every year for Chinook. That's it. And in the next decade, we could see them go away if we don't continue to push hard.
We got to do something. We've got to leave something in place for our future generations.
When I think of who we would be without salmon, it's not the prettiest picture.
The loss of salmon would be a loss of our identity. In order to live out our culture, we have to have salmon to fish. We have to have salmon come back to the waters and thrive, just for not our spirituality, but also for the environments. You know, the health of the land is lost out. You know, farmers never used to have to spray their fields to replenish the nutrients because the salmon provided that. Not anymore. And so it affects everybody's health.
With 2 little boys at home, I want to make sure that they never have to figure out what a life without salmon looks like. And I want to make sure that their kids and the next 7 generations after that don't have to understand what a life without salmon would even look like. It's just so disturbing to me to even consider it. It's dark.
Sound on. That video I've seen it a few times now, and it's just always so rich and so many dimensions to the relationships that are presented there. Yeah, so now I'm so excited to welcome our panelists into our conversation. Cindy Curtis Myatt, the pastor of North Cascades Wild Church, Rankin, the director of Glacier Peak Institute, and Denice Rochelle, the founder and director of the Bronze Chapter. Thank you all so much for being here today, and just super excited to learn from you and to be inspired by the work that you do in your communities. And so I'm going to start with a question that actually has two parts. One is if you would briefly yourselves, your organizations, and answer the question, what inspired the founding of your organizations? That's part one. And the second part of this question is, what systemic inequities and structural barriers hinders outdoor access in your communities? And how does this lack of access impact individuals? So first, about the kind of the impetus of your organization, the founding or mission, and then speaking of the structural inequities and barriers that hinder outdoor access for the communities that you serve and how that impacts individuals. And Cindy, we'll start with you. If you would just, tell us your response to that question.
Sure. I am Cindy Myatt, like you said, pastor of the North Cascades Wild Church. And when I started this journey, it was through my seminary years. I went to seminary for 4 years. And before I even was allowed to go, I was interviewed, and they asked, this panel of 18 people asked me what I saw myself doing once I finished seminary. And I said, I really don't have any idea. I just know it hasn't been invented yet. We haven't thought about what this could be. And they were fascinated by that idea. And I think we are those who realize that the church has to change. We're kind of excited about that idea that I said, I have no idea. So after finishing, or actually while I was in seminary, I had read a little bit about the Wild Church Network. And I knew that I really didn't want to stay within a structured church building. And I decided, along with the help of my synod through my, I am Lutheran by the denomination, but not necessarily, we adhere to many of the things that the Lutherans do, but the one thing that I feel like is we are really quite connected with nature, and we meet outside. We, every once in a while we'll meet in a building in the winter, but I prefer to be outside. And I think we have such an amazing group of people that have come together, because many of them were hurt by the church, and the large percentage of the people that come are LGBTQ plus. And so when I started this, I know a lot of people were kind of confused with the idea that a building should be part of this. All churches have this building. And I said, well, we have the greatest cathedral of all, this beautiful nature that we're in. The sky is our chapel, and I just really love the idea of being outside. So I guess the biggest hindrance would be the fact that a lot of people don't understand the idea of, something about being inside a building, especially a church building, can be really off-putting. And also, there's been so much damage done for the LGBTQ community that they don't want to go inside a building anymore. And so I think that's where the systemic part for me has been, is that those who already have been churched and expect a typical relationship, expect that building to be part of it, right? But there's this really crazy thing that happens when you get a building. Everybody sits in the same pew. They get upset if somebody moves, the flags out of the sanctuary, or something silly. And I'm like, we don't have any of that. We sit around a picnic table. We have a fire in the winter or in the spring. We take nice long walks. We commune with nature. Nature, in my mind, isn't it's an equal. And that's where we need to continue to get deeper into this. And so that's where the pushback comes from. I'm one of those people, when I walk into a meeting at my synod, they see me as this radical, crazy woman who is constantly saying, let's try something different. We don't need a building. Why do we have to do it this way? Why do we always have to do it the same old way? And that scares them. It scares them.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Cindy. And for folks who don't know, Cindy, you are inhabit in the Upper Skagit region, Concrete and Marble Mount, and that is where the church is located. Yeah. Oak, I'd like to ask you the same question, about the inspiration of your organization, and then what systemic inequalities and structural barriers have hindered outdoor access for your communities and how that's impacted individuals.
Yeah, I got 5 minutes. All right, here we go. First off, thank you, Cindy. I was reading an article yesterday on just churches, and a conversation that hit me on that I'll build upon is just like how our society's gone from community, more like a community-based society and workplace, to this individual, more about your own progression as yourself. And there's a really challenge with churches. And we are, in essence, community creatures, and we really need that in ourselves to do as part of our being and our identity, is really how do we create that community and acceptance for all these wonderful people are out there, and you're doing great work there. And that's something we're trying to do as well at GPI. At Glacier Peak Institute, we've ran, it's our 10-year anniversary. We ran 2,750 programs outdoors in Darrington and Concrete school districts, primarily in Darrington. Over 97,000 hours of kids outdoors. And we've done this like with a pretty small budget, which is amazing in 10 years. And why? In addition, we serve BIPOC, tribal, low-income housing, Latino, and additional groups within the Puget Sound region and other nonprofits we partner with. But we're based up in Darrington, and why we exist is 10 years ago, there was the 2014 Oso slide. And so this disaster came and it killed 43 members of our community. And it was really hard and tragic. It shut down the road, and it caused us to really look at our community. We'd been looking before this, but it really caused us to look and say, well, how can we heal from this and how can we move forward? But this was the second disaster that befell our community. The first disaster was the economic collapse of our timber community with timber. And so for those of you that don't know, Darrington and similar forest communities all up and down the Cascades, they're oftentimes the lowest income communities in their counties. Poverty's risen by 50%, special education rates have tripled. Schools have been cut by a third. In Darrington, 1 in 25 youth are dead before 30. And funding that was supposed to help post-Northwest Forest Plan never arrived. It got divided evenly based on enrollment in schools. So like the federal programs are gonna say, we're gonna help you with transitioning out of timber economies, and promise that with this change. And that never happened. There's a whole collection of other factors as well that I don't have time to go into. But a big factor as well is our kids were no longer getting outdoors. Here we have this rural community up in the mountains, and there's this bias that just think that these kids are getting outdoors. And the teachers came to us, and they came to us after the slide. And I was on the Grand Canyon when the slide happened. So I was already outdoors. I came off 3 weeks later. I didn't think there was anything I could do to help because we're just used to not getting any services coming up to Darrington. And so, or help coming. But my uncle called me, he's the mayor, Dan Rankin, was like, there's actually an opportunity to make a difference. You should come home, Oak. And so I came home, met with teachers, met with the community, said the kids weren't going outside, STEM programs aren't reaching. So we did research and we looked at the kids not getting outdoors and just the layers of benefit that I've had in my life that could offer to the Darrington youth with these low income programs, these high risk, high oftentimes special needs, IEPs in the school district. And so how can we really support transitional change in our community and embrace our identity as a rural community? Because in its place, I have so much respect for Sean Yannity's video on that, of his connection with salmon and the Stillaguamish, and that connection to place is so strong. And we've lost a lot of that over time in our community. So how do we bring that forth, that idea of that community, that gathering spaces of the outdoors, and that sense of belonging and place with people, and place together in a way to steward that into the future? We don't have, oftentimes it's low income. Some of the barriers we've run into is we break it into three, different than you did, Keiko, but our access to the land, we struggle with that. Like a lot of it's been bought up. We don't own our forests. The Park Service, the Forest Service has moved out of our communities. The private lands are owned by Germany, Seattle, elsewhere. City of Seattle owns our waterfronts in Darrington and Concrete. There's just multiple challenges. So we provide transportation to get to lands and access. The second is gear. Oftentimes they can't afford the gear to start that mountain biking or that rafting. Kids more likely to die than ever raft the river with that 1 in 25 before GPI. And so how do we start to get them the gear? And then finally, the third one is stewardship or mentoring. How do we do it ethically? How do we teach them how to do it? And how do we have it with a stewardship mindset for future generations to look at that sustainability? And there's just like a lack of access that people have this understanding of that rural community kids are outside, and we're not finding that even they face these barriers to the outdoors. Oftentimes kids come to school with holes in their shoes. It's like rainy and sloggy here. And so how do we really move forward with creating access to the community?
Yeah. Thanks, Oak. That's amazing. Wow. I want to find out how your gala did, but we'll talk a little bit later.
It's
I know you
tomorrow.
just had, it's tomorrow. Okay, good luck on that. Yeah, shout out to Glacier Peak Institute. They are having their gala tomorrow for, to fund all of these activities that you just heard about. Denice, I want to ask you the same question about the inspiration of the founding of your organization and then the systemic inequities and structural barriers that hinder outdoor access for the communities that you serve.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for the question. It's really great to see some names here, surprising that I know and knew a long time ago. So kind of cool to see people in the DM. So kind of feels more homey than I expected. It's very cool. I got my little cheat notes here because I don't keep these questions in my mind. What inspired the Bronze Chapter really was just really my lived experience of engaging in outdoor recreation and not ever or very little seeing people who looked even remotely like me doing the same. So my childhood experience growing up is in Seattle is much different than most Black people. My dad was interested in a lot of hobbies and activities and sports, and which was very unusual for a Black man in the 60s and 70s. So I grew up boating and fishing and camping and riding dirt bikes and motorcycles and biking and going on road trips and water skiing and doing all that kind of stuff. But as a kid, I literally never saw anybody else looking like me doing that. And especially because when I was really young in 70, we moved from Seattle to Kirkland. Kirkland back then was country and it was also all white. So I was one of the maybe 4 people, person of color in my school ever. So this has always been my lived experience. But in 2018, I took a pretty long road trip to California. I went on the Washington coast, California coast, and Oregon coast, and I decided to camp on the way back. And so I just camped at various spots. I was traveling by myself, and I never saw anybody else who looked remotely like me, that could be easily identifiable as a person of color. No families, no individuals, definitely no solo female travelers. And I didn't see anybody at the beach flying kites with me. I didn't see anybody at the campground. I didn't see anybody in these small towns where I love to go and hang out and explore. And so this trip was about over 2,500 miles. So when I came home, I hit up some socials that I was in, Facebook, and some affinity groups. And I said, well, where is everybody? Because there's thousands of people collectively in these outdoor affinity groups, but I'm still not seeing people outside. So I was like, what's up? And surprisingly, people started to answer me. And their answers fit into 3 categories. I don't have anyone to go with, so I don't have a community. I don't have equipment, and I don't have a skill. I don't know what to do. And so that, it was really heartbreaking for me, because it's not something was never my experience. And I was thinking I could literally do something about all those things, but how to do that? And so I just started renting campgrounds around where I lived, and then some other places, because Washington is gorgeous. We have all these environments and climates, and it's beautiful. We can go east and have a completely different environment than on the west side. And so I just started renting campgrounds and offering to teach people camp and basic outdoor skills. And so in 2018, that's really how it started. And then things got bigger and bigger, and more people started to participate. And then COVID came and kind of shut everything down. For me, I didn't want to deal with that. And then I started getting emails from people and text messages and things saying, are we going to do this again? Are you going to do this again? Are we going to keep doing this? So I said, oh, wow, okay, there's still some interest here. So I started up again, renting campgrounds, and got bigger and bigger. And at one point I held a camp out about 50 something people one weekend. It was COVID, so they were keeping the campsites, the people count small. And then the next weekend, more people wanted to come, so I had 50 more. So it was like 100 people of color we had camping in like 2 weekends. So wanting to just be together and learn skills and get outside together and not feel judged, and just have, be building community. So I started to get a little worried about liability. What if somebody falls in the campfire and tries to sue me and take my house and all this stuff? So I was like, oh, there's a big need here. So long story short, I formed the Bronze Chapter as a nonprofit, because a for-profit didn't feel good to my heart, and literally figured it out. I formed the Bronze Chapter in August of 2021, and I just figured it out. And so our I can kind of wrap up by saying that I'll read you our mission.
No, this is actually a perfect segue to, and you'll be able to tell us more to our second question, which is really how fostering outdoor connections has benefited your communities, and what positive impacts have you observed among those you serve. So yeah, Denice, if you can just tell us that and
keep going.
Keep going.
Well, so the Bronze Chapter just has a space where people of color can feel comfortable coming, learning outdoor skills. We're basically skills based, and so folks can come here and learn skills that they don't feel comfortable learning in a white dominant class or experience environment. And so we're just creating a more skilled BIPOC outdoor community by literally just providing opportunity and inviting people to come and say, hey, do you want to learn this thing on land? Do you want to learn this thing on the water? And we're just giving people space who are interested in kind of taking their outdoor connection to a different level, to learn skills and get out to get out farther and see the magnificent state we have, and then hopefully start to grow connections to want to invest in that and advocate for it and keep it healthy and save it, preserve it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Oak or Cindy, if you could answer that same question of what impact have you seen amongst those you serve? What positive impact, and how has this benefited your communities, your work in there? And Oak, maybe I'll start with you.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I've seen an increase in the time the community as a whole spent outdoors in the schools this year. I started with 6 programs our first year. We ran almost 600 this year. And we run everything from workforce development. A lot of the jobs don't reach the kids up here. So first time work opportunities in the forest, a lot of times that goes to the I-5 corridor. And so just starting getting and working in the forest, and kids saving up, going into college now in outdoor careers. We have several studying outdoor recreation that are from minority backgrounds that are in our school and part of our community this year, which is huge. I had a student yesterday talking about the impact of GPI that just with the outdoors, it's going to be, and coming from a pretty at-risk, struggling background without parents in the picture, and going down to study Western. And so there is a creation of opportunity where there wasn't investment between the teachers' expectations in there, that they can have the sense of identity with the outdoors and this calming. They don't need us to get outdoors. Like, we get them started, but ultimately that's like one of our goals is they don't need us. We don't need to be a gatekeeper. And just seeing those inspirational stories and that increased demand for the outdoors, where there wasn't like hope in our community a lot, just because of the historical disinvestment. Anytime anybody tries anything, it's really hard to get things moving forward. Yeah, and seeing like kids light up and suddenly they're inspired to go biking, and they'll start saving up, working lawns, mowing lawns to buy to buy a bicycle once we get them started on this, so they can do that on their own. And that independence factor, they realize, maybe it's not biking, maybe it's just foraging, and we're teaching them how to forage and gather food for themselves. And a lot of kids coming to school didn't have always full breakfast when they're coming at home. And so like seeing them get food at school. Now we partner with the school. We are hoping to double or triple the size of the garden this next year to grow more foods, have kids growing food for the gardens outdoor, doing that, as well as our foraging programs. And so it's just really starting to see, it's challenging. That demand is growing, and how do we grow with that? But that's because we're providing a needed service into these communities where there wasn't anybody coming through, because there's oftentimes skipped over. There was another story that popped into my brain right now, but just seeing them light up with the possibilities of realizing something, that it can be a future of them, whether that's the outside art that we're supporting them in first-time jobs, and the teachers with in-school programmings, because there's not, in a lot of schools, there are specialists that come in that teach like science or art and do these. In Darrington and Concrete school districts, there's not those for the elementary. So seeing those students being able to go out and, or those teachers be able to go out and be able to get science and have that help with the outdoors, and especially with the high percentage of IEPs, which directly correlates with ACEs from studies is showing, to youth, is just seeing that light up and that ability. Or when we're serving our partner groups and they're learning how to canoe for the first time, these kids, and same as our kids, as they get better over time, or they're learning how to filter water. Like, we're giving them just the water filter and trying to have them do these things on their own, as they can be empowered, is really amazing.
Thank you, Oak, so much. Cindy, how about you with the, the congregation that you are building of folks who have been basically disenfranchised from religious traditions?
Yeah. Our connections or our challenges and is, I think that right now, more so than ever since COVID, people need community. And I have found that, I'm not saying that we're a bunch of therapists by no means, but we do serve a place where people can come and feel safe in that space. and know that this is a place that they can speak what's on their heart and in their minds. The community that like I said before, the community that I large portion of the, I'd say over half of the folks that come are of the LGBTQ plus community. And so, you know, I have fostered this idea that part of the work that we are all working on is language, and trying to figure out a different way of saying the things that we need to be said. The divine is found in such amazing places, and it doesn't have to be what everyone thinks it should be. It can be as simple as just the beautiful sunset or the waters hitting the rocks. We live in a very, like Oak was saying, we live in an area that these folks are so marginalized as far as income, ability to get a job, ability to get down valley so that they can go to a job. You know, I feel like I'm more of a pastor of a community than I am of a church. I try very hard to connect with these people, not just every other Sunday, but I attend different meetings throughout the community between Concrete, Rockport, and Marble Mount. These folks need this community, but not just to come to these meetings, but we go out into the community and try to help in ways that we can. It's just interesting to me to see how it has flourished, how people, when they come, they know that it's not just about this one period. They walk away with something that they can use throughout the week, and it becomes this kind of spreading of kindness through. And I just think that what we need more than ever is community. And so if we can find a place for folks, it doesn't have to be about numbers. You know, it's about making sure people know they have a place to come and feel safe and feel like they're out there and in nature, and realize that the idea of the divine is way bigger than what we Christians and other faiths have made it. We want to put it in this little teeny tiny box, and it's just huge. And when you go out and see what all of us have seen when we're out hiking and biking and kayaking and just sitting along the edge of the river, it's huge. And I feel so blessed that I can be a part of this community, just to say, hey, if you need to talk, I'm here. You know, that's the other thing I love. I don't do sermons. We talk. And I figure, you know, we get preached to every single day. Why should I do that to them? So it's another kind of different thing that I do. And I actually kind of love it because I get to hear what's on people's hearts and minds.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to move us on to our next question, which has to do with community partnerships and examples. You know, of course, we are part of the Collaborative Action Network here. Many folks in the room are part of the Collaborative Action Network currently, or are thinking about it. We really hope you do think about joining if you're not already. But asking each of you if you can share examples of successful partnerships, successful community partnerships that are that the folks in the room can take inspiration from, perhaps consider adopting. This could include practices from your own organization or others that you admire. And so the question is, again, how do you utilize community partnerships in your initiatives? And Cindy, I'll do the same. We'll just kind of go backwards again. If you can start us off with that.
Sure. As I said before, a large portion of my people are LGBTQ plus, so we do have a partnership with PFLAG, which is another, I think they're another partner within the North Sound ACH. They, for those who don't know what PFLAG is, it's a a place for education and for the LGBTQ plus to help people become allies and find places to learn. But we also do a lot within the community right here. So we keep our ears and eyes open quite a bit, and we do a little bit of funding if somebody needs help with propane during the winter or clothing to keep themselves warm. I have a few people down in Concrete and a few people in Rockport and a few people in Marble Mount that we always are making sure that if the resources that are already there need help, they know who to call beyond us. We're not necessarily the ones that are working at the food banks or at the shelters, but they know our name is definitely on the phone call list to say, hey, we need help. Is there something you can do?
Yeah.
And I continue to meet with the Concrete Resource Coalition. They do the same thing. They are, they have the numbers of what's going on in the schools, and Concrete school is struggling big, and they're starting to do a woman within the community is starting, or has been for quite a while, been doing music with the school, because that's another thing they just don't do anymore. So we've chosen to help her with her. I feel like our call as a group has been to lift others up. It's not about us,
Yeah, I love that.
We've been around enough. So I'd rather let others have the stage, and then if they need help, we'll figure out a way to help them.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Cindy. That's fantastic. Yeah, I love that. Oak, how about you?
Oh, wow.
Partnerships.
Partnerships is how GPI has been able to survive is through partnerships. One of the things of creating a strong, we did research creating GPI was so many how to be most effective. And that was one of the ways is creating a strong network of partnerships to interlay and do everything. And I say that, and you just have to be very careful with that and aware of where you're coming from as far as advice. There are a lot of stories we tell ourselves about who we are as Americans, and there's stories we hear who we are as Americans, who we are as rural, who we are as this, or who we think of as those groups. And there's a lot of a lack of awareness when I experience from our rural communities of just the struggle of the diversity that is here, the inclusion that is here, the community, and what that means. When I go to work with partners, I don't have a lot of time. There's so many needs in our community, so I have to be conscientious. But I've found over time, from this side of partnering with organizations, sometimes it's all about that organization, or they're great talkers, and in the end, there's just biases I have to deal with for the rural community, or the funding's about going to them and serving them. And so I have to be intentional with that. And that's awareness you have to be. Is it even worth, can you overcome preconceived notions and biases and understanding the need in your community where they actually want to invest, not in themselves to be a colonial style movement of work coming from down valley up and then going back down valley again, but actually investing into the community itself for real change. On the other side, we found those partners. There's ones that work, or there's some that we can work with that are there and they get the kids outdoors and they have expertise. I do not. And it's great. And kids can be inspired by new professions. On the other side, when I'm working with our partner organizations, that same piece of having humility for myself as an organization that was not necessarily given from perspectives of rural communities. How do we give that to these other organizations when we go to meet with them and talk about, well, what do you need? Not having and maybe if we're working with a low-income housing group, they don't know how many kids are going to show up. We'll adapt, we'll work, whatever you need. They may need transportation. We don't have pretty vehicles, but we have vehicles. And so we'll go down and support them with transportation on those needs. We're teaching and just have a conversation about what works for them, for making sure that we're meeting them at their needs, and we're willing to learn from them about what it means for their relationship with the outdoors. And how do we share that too? Because we are all one community here in the Puget Sound.
Yeah, thank you, Oak. I really appreciate that. I especially appreciate your perspective that, there are biases against rural communities. And I think that's really important to highlight and uplift. And, and that, again, as you say, there's a kind of a national narrative about
Yeah. And I
that
was
plays against
just
that. So yeah,
one
much
thing to
to
add
talk
on that.
about.
And it's just that I didn't believe that before starting GPI within the Puget Sound until I
And now
started
you know.
facing it much
Yeah,
more.
yeah, yeah. Denice, how about you? If you can tell us about how you utilize community partnerships and what advice you can offer about fostering successful partnerships.
Well, the Bronze chapter wouldn't exist if it wasn't for community partnerships and collaborations. It was actually the executive director of the San Juan Preservation Trust that lent me some of her staff to help me write the Bronze chapter's first grant that got us started. So literally the Bronze chapter wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the San Juan Preservation Trust. and there's, being a small new nonprofit that is extraordinarily underfunded, we really rely on collaborations and partnerships with aligned intentions to do what we do and do what we want to do and do it better. And so right now, the Community Boating Center in Bellingham is probably our biggest, most impactful partner. They really help us get more people of color out in and on the water, because that's one of our core things is wanting to help improve people of color's relationship with water. But Justice Outside has also been really core to keeping us going, and also the folks at Washington State Parks, folks at Olympic Forest and Mount Baker Snoqualmie Forest for our winter programs out there. So yeah, literally the Bronze chapter wouldn't exist if we couldn't work together with other people and gain other people's wisdom and help, and everything goes along with that.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Denice. And I want to uplift for you. I keep thinking about the Bronze chapter is sponsoring the first BIPOC team for Bellingham's
Hey,
upcoming, ski
the
to
first
sea.
women of color team in the history of the
Yeah,
world.
so congratulations on that. Thank you all so much for sharing of this wisdom. I just want to do a shout out. I just, I know in the participants, there are a number of other organizations who work within an outdoor space. And so a shout out to Vamos, our partner Vamos. I see North Cascades Institute, it was in the room, and also Wild Watcom. And I hope I'm not missing others, but if you're there, we're so grateful for your presence on the.
I see April Katz out there with the Arrow Project.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we're so grateful for everyone who has come to listen today. So thanks again to our panelists. I want to share with you a second video that we have, which is from the Soxhuatl tribe. And just again, thank you for sharing these amazing stories with us, and wisdom and passion and heart for the communities you serve. And for our attendees, the resources mentioned in the presentation will be sent out in our follow-up email and uploaded to our publicly available resource library in the near future on our website. So be sure to look for that. And then we're going to bookend this live panel with a final offering from our tribal communities, this one from the Soxhuatl tribe. And we encourage you, please stick around for our breakout session afterwards, where we'll get a chance to kind of discuss what we've heard and learned from today. And so with that, just looking forward to seeing this video with you.
When you're hiking, it's just you. Easy to get lost in thought, easy to get lost in all the weight that you're carrying. Every time you take a step, you gotta release some of that weight, some of that pressure you have on you. You'll open yourself up more when you're hiking. I am James Ironheart from Soxwaddle Indian Tribe. Soxwaddle is a unique place. It is located near the town of Darrington, Washington. Soxwaddle was originally in Sauk Prairie, and back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the town of Darrington burnt down the longhouses, and we got relocated here after we got done helping the Forest Service map out the Cascade Range. The weather is so unpredictable that you could have rain here, but then when you go over the mountain pass, you can get snow in July. I was doing writing assessment, and I needed more practice with writing, so I started asking around some of our elders, and they would always say that we would hike over the pass, and that brought me to the idea of, hey, let's try hiking over the pass.
I'd spend the summers up here with my grandfather, and he would tell me there was a number of different trails that went up and over across Cascade Mountains. When James started talking about it, I always just started to get excited because, you know, geez, if we can hike some simple trails, I'm going to go along.
Trekking poles.
So make sure when you're out, always get a good flashlight.
Yeah, get a good flashlight. Excuse me.
No, be quiet. Just so we have it. Oh, okay.
Why is that down there?
Because we're asking for permission to go down this trail. Come on, let's go get our stuff.
Good.
Because we are humans that share territory with the plant life, the animal life, and the bug life. We have to ask permission to use the trails because this is their home. The Big Walk helps out with health in many different ways. That definitely there is mental health that happens because you can't go on the Big Walk and carry all that weight with you. And as soon as you do, you're going to want to go into the woods and start releasing that there healthily. What you bring into the woods is what you have. So if you can get rid of it there and you don't have to carry that weight, then that's awesome. That mental break that you got to push through, it can hit multiple different ways. Some people get grumpy, some people get angry, and they push through that. And then some people get like sad and emotional, and then you really got to push through that. And the only thing we can do as other hikers is pull some weight off from you, but that's only your physical. It's not your mental stuff.
You know, the first hike was being funded by the Department of Health, you know, because we have a number of people who are trying to combat diabetes here. And we wanted to get people more active and interested in having a stronger, active life.
Of course, because you're out in the mountains, you're backpacking, up to 25 to 45, 55 pounds on your back, you're going to start losing weight.
Those trips were just awesome, you know, to see, you know, the sights and everything. And then to know, okay, at some point, you know, our people did travel these paths.
Bear paw.
We were going to just take our time and appreciate everything around us. And it was a chance to share with our young ones, you know, the different plants our people used to eat.
You'll see all sides of yourself when you hike. Some the good sides, the bad sides, and all of you when you hike. And to be able to push through and go through some emotional stuff while you're out there. And like I said, it's a place to go lose some of the weight that you carry with you.
What an awesome video. I just want to thank the Stillaguamish tribe for the first video that we saw, the Soxhawtl tribe, which is the one we just were able to witness, and Children of the Setting Sun Productions for their incredible video shared today. Again, highlighting what Keiko said earlier, North Sound ACH is committed to elevating the voices and our Indigenous stories of our tribal partners. Our sovereign nations are invaluable to the region, and I encourage everyone to visit our resource library to watch the remaining videos of the series called Tribal Wellness. It is an incredible series, and I highly encourage everybody to go back into our resource library and watch the rest of them. So we are going to be moving as time moves on to our group discussions, and we're going to move into small group discussions, which is in breakout rooms. I would also like to encourage for people to put their name in the chat if they would like interpretation services in the breakout rooms. Thank you, Irene, for the interpretation support. When we move into the breakout rooms, we're going to discuss how would you describe the relationship and your connection with the outdoors? Have you encountered any barriers when seeking access or connection to nature? Also, if you have any ideas from today inspired you to take back to your work or community. So we really want, people to really focus on the first questions and then go ahead and discuss. Wonderful to see all the people coming back in. That gives me energy. I was like, we have 4 people coming back. But I'm excited to see the numbers climbing. It gives me a moment of levity of taking a breath. It's okay. So thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for sticking with us again. Thank you for going into the small breakouts. Those can kind of sometimes be really great and sometimes really nerve-wracking. So I appreciate everybody's time and attention to that space. So I wanted to open up the space for anybody that wants to share out. They can come off mute. They can turn their camera on. They can put anything in chat, whatever feels good in your body of what you talked about in your small group. If anybody wants to share, I would love to open that space if anybody's brave.
I can go ahead.
Yeah.
Hey everyone. My name is April Katz, and I am the executive director and the founder of the Arrow Project. And Arrow stands for Adaptive Inclusive Recreation of Whatcom County. So we definitely have a few barriers in our community. One of them is trail accessibility, but with community partnership like WMBC, we've been working on adaptive mountain biking and making sure those trails are accessible. But for our youth, Community Boating Center has been one of our partnerships, and we really enjoy kayaking and being on the water for those with autism. They love it, they thrive. And so with that, if you guys have any grants that you know of, please send them my way. My email is aprilkatz@arrowproject.com. We're a small but mighty nonprofit, and that's a little bit about us.
Thank you, April. I really appreciate that. I'm going to elevate the quick question that was put in the chat earlier to give context. Let's see. I wanted to read it. It says, I grew up thinking that the outdoor recreation, hiking, biking, etc., were hobbies only white families could afford and had time for. I'm Latina and my family worked in the agricultural fields, orchards all day. So being outdoors and doing physical activity, put in quotation marks, for fun after long hours under the sun did not make sense. Spending hard-earned money on expensive hiking shoes or recreational gear also did not make sense. How would you encourage minorities to start taking up space in this field despite beliefs we might have grown up with? Great question.
I will say you belong in this field, and it's a great place to be as a community member. And I'm just gonna say there's a podcast I heard on that, and I'll pop this in to it as well, but open it up to somebody else to respond as well.
One of the things is the willingness to believe in a person that they are also part of this field, which is one thing is that believing, but the other thing is also believing they're capable, because sometimes they don't know what they don't know, that they are in the right place, and making believe is something they have to also the person to learn, because the fields is just the one word fields.
And I would say how GPI started out is like we started out with like, how do you do this? And I have a long experience being outdoors, but it started out with something that is knowable and reachable and familiar, oftentimes a local park, to begin with. And getting outdoors and starting that way is a great way that we started utilizing just right around Darrington immediately, because we didn't have transportation. We didn't have other things. We just had the forest next door or the parks next door, and started utilizing those. Really know, and it's just the sensory of being outdoors and having time and see how and build from there.
Hi Vanessa, this is Michaela. And for those on the call who don't know me, my name is Michaela Vendiola. I serve as the tribal liaison for Northtown ACH. I'm an enrolled tribal member, and I grew up on the Lummi Indian Reservation. But I just want to answer your question, Vanessa, and to the person who put it into the chat box or directed it towards you. I immediately was thinking about like how to help somebody rejuvenate after long hours in the sun. My brain goes, to find the water. Sorry if you can't hear me. I don't know why my mic is low. So my suggestion would be to them is to find the water, find where they can become rejuvenated again after long hours in the sun. And we're really blessed in this area to have access points to bodies of water, but whether that be the Salish Sea, lakes, or rivers. It doesn't have to be, going out and walking around, but just sitting by the water. That'd be my suggestion.
Thank you, Michaela. I appreciate you elevating that. For anybody that had a little bit of trouble hearing Michaela, which I did get to hear, is she said for rejuvenation, and the things that come to her mind are getting to water, to rejuvenate, to be bodies of water, whether it's here at the coast or river or what have you, to be able to rejuvenate your space, your spirit is to get to the water. So thank you, Michaela. I always appreciate your answers and your voice in this space. It's wonderful. So if there are anybody that has any questions or anything for our panelists, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. We want to open that space for anybody that has any questions for our panelists directly. I would love to be able to hear any or read any for you in the chat, so they say.
Vanessa, I can jump in. Our group talked about like one of the more like psychological barriers of a lot of us having grown up poor, where like outdoor activities were not a thing. Like I grew up like skiing and snowboarding and hiking were things that wealthy people did. And so like there's a psychological barrier still to like putting money and time towards getting outdoors. And so what like I like would love to hear if any of the panelists have more insight into this, but like what works really well for me is focusing on like low barrier things. Like it doesn't have to be a big fancy hike. It can just be like hiking around or walking around the neighborhood, but just more low or reading a book in the yard. But I think for a lot of people still, there's still like, that's not something I do. And if you didn't grow up with that in your childhood, it can be really hard to get over that like money barrier.
Any of our panelists kind of want to field that one? I would welcome any of that.
Outdoor gear is expensive. I bought a lot of mine at thrift stores. But if you're an organization, there are gear libraries that have been established around regions. We don't have any in North Puget Sound. GPI, we've been trying to open one for our partners in our community. But the WTA, Washington Trails Association, does have one that's accessible and free. You just have to get to Seattle, and that's a very limiting factor to get started within it. And it's how GPI began is we started borrowing gear from them, and then we got donations over time. We have a used gear, like a lot of people get rid of their gear. So if you're looking at have somewhere to store, that's another barrier. And as an organization, we do a used gear drive, and we use a lot of that gear and maintain it, but use a lot of gear to get youth outdoors that way through it. But it is an expensive hobby, and like, how do you do and start to train? And there are ways that I've found to do it, like through thrift stores and others, but it's also a conversation like you have to have with your identity and who you are, and just be aware of as you are trying on a new identity with the outdoors. And that conversation I found to be helpful. And GPI, as far as like, we broker the gear and provide that to get the kids started and see that as a value. And that's how we've been able to get that and have kids start valuing actually saving up money for gear in low-income community, or starting down these careers. But it is a difficult hurdle, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Thank you, Oak. We'd like to ask all of you panelists one last question. It's a really loaded question, and you only have a minute to answer each. But we really love to hear from you about, Cindy, you touched on this. What is one question you are never asked that you would wish to share about, that you wish someone would ask you about the work that you do? And Denice, can we start with you?
Bummer. Boy, I was hoping to be inspired by the first two people. People don't ask me how much things cost. There's kind of an assumption that that our organization is really well funded and has a lot of money because of visuals and what we do. But there's a big gap and misconception about how much the community health events that we offer actually cost. So I would, yeah, that's a huge conversation that I would love to across the board talk more about in community and outside of community as the heavy lift that new nonprofits and even established nonprofits kind of operate under.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Oak, how about you?
I don't know on that one that I often get asked is that I think for me, like, that I don't get asked is like, they think this is how difficult is it or easy is it to do what you do? A lot of people have the assumptions the outdoors there and you just go out, and it's that simple. But with what we do, it is because we're in the schools doing STEM, we have to follow all these policies and procedures, and we're just dealing with systematic biases on our end for our communities and investments. I think it's just like understanding those substantials. Like the greatest thing is the story of what we all believe is a story of rural communities and who that is and what they have. And there's just a different story out there in reality and nuances is my answer on there. And we're all one community in the Puget Sound, so we really need to appreciate each of these individual communities and how we can invest in them.
Yeah. And Cindy, you had such great, thoughts about this during our break.
I think that for me, I've never had anybody ask, can I do what you do? And I think that you can. We're only limited by our imagination. It doesn't have to be. We are so certain that it has to be done a certain way. And if you have a friend or a coworker or even a family member, just say, hey, let's go and try, I don't know, archery, or go to the park nearby, take our dog for a walk, even we even do pub church, and a lot of our pubs have beautiful outdoor places to sit and chat. But I think that we got to get beyond what society tells us is what we should be doing. And I think that that's where a lot of the folks that are here right now we're edge walkers, right? We're the people that see something that nobody else sees, and we say that needs to be done. And I think that's in all of us. We just have to dig deep to find it. And don't be afraid. Just try it.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Correct. Don't be afraid. Let's try it. We have a community. That's what these learning sessions are here for. So when we have those spaces of like, how can we do this? We have people in our region who are the experts. And, again, just thank you so much, panelists, for your time. Thank you, participants, for your time. I really appreciate it. I am wanting to let everybody know the links for the recording, the slides, and the resources today are going to be uploaded into a resource library soon. I also want to encourage everybody to fill out the post-session survey going to be provided by email. Also, again, offering our team at northsoundach.org email if you have any questions or want to just reach out and say, who is that person? What is their organization? If you want to throw your name, be part of the Collaborative Action Network, we would really appreciate it. We just lift our hands up to you and thank you for your time and attention today on this beautiful day. And also get outside and go enjoy the rest of your day, because we've been in front of the computer for 2 hours. So thank you. I appreciate your time. I honor all of you, and just thank you so much.